Hello, how's it going? My name's Stanley Barrett, and I guess we're going to be walking through how I went about creating the scene. Um, Bit of a background of me. I'm a 3D artist. I'm currently working for Modern Storyteller. We are developing The Forgotten City, which is the standalone reimagining of a mod. Um, yeah, but anyway, things aside, this is what we're going to be talking about today. My other project, I guess my other work is generally more stylized. The game I'm working on currently is very realistic, and it's a good thing they took a chance on me in order to create that kind of stuff, since it's very different to my art style. And despite that, I found the transition pretty smooth, all things considering. I have a bit of experience doing more realistic stuff, but I think the same kind of principles that you can learn and develop kind of apply across multiple things. So this concept in particular was more of a, I guess, exploration piece for me. My previous stuff has been a bit more experimental, and I guess this one kind of threw out a lot of what I'd learned in the past in terms of how I could develop a composition and use lighting, high to low poly modeling, and kind of strip all that away and see if I could still create an environment based upon this really cool concept. So the concept is by Tim Kaminski. It's his artwork, which is Cabin in the Woods. I really loved this piece of work when I first found it, so I decided that it'd be a great thing to convert into 3D. So I went and asked him on Twitter, and he agreed that I would be able to create it as long as I created it, which is awesome. So thanks for that, Tim. Cool. So this piece in particular was one of the first times actually that I've just strictly worked from a piece from a concept art, and just decided how close can I get to the original, while still being recreated into 3D. Um, and so I decided to tackle this doing a completely unlit scene, um, and just relying on hand painted texturing in order to get the look that I wanted. So, how did I get to that point? Well, I have a few. Unfortunately, when I first created this, I didn't set it up in the sense that I'd be creating a tutorial later on. Um, but I do luckily have a few progress shots that I like to take along the way. So this one in particular, I started out in Blender. This was the first, I guess, hour modeling from the silhouette, and just trying to block out the main shapes. And I think most of that geometry didn't actually change a whole lot from the get go. Um, I actually cheated a lot of different things in this project, which you generally wouldn't do in a game. Since I just wanted to establish this one side shot, I didn't really use a lot of tileable textures, which you generally would. Um, and I guess I cheated in the sense that I use, I guess, quite a few different texture maps that you wouldn't normally, since everything was individually unwrapped. In the case of a game, you would definitely want to be using more tileable textures, and when you're creating an unlit scene, it poses a lot of challenges because I guess you need to be able to create assets that hold lighting information without it, um, while still tiling, and that can pose some other challenges. So this one in particular, I decided throw all that away. This is just going to be more of an experiment test on trying to build my skills doing unlit texturing and hand painted texturing, and trying to get as close to the concept art as possible. Um, so initially I blocked it out. I guess I was trying to get the shapes correctly from this work. Moving along, I pulled them all into Substance Painter, so this would have been after I'd UV mapped them. I brought everything into Substance Painter and then just gave it, I guess, the base underlay of what the colors would be. So this was relatively straightforward. In order to get all of this down really quickly, um, I just use the vertex coloring inside of Substance Painter to just quickly slap down some colors. And you'll notice particular attention to how I could create some shadows, and just trying to get that lighting information in from the get-go that I could build upon later. So this was, I guess, the first paint overlay. So this was trying to establish more of the other shapes, especially in the chimney and other sections, and just trying to build upon that. More importantly, it was to make sure that the thing closest to the camera, so this wooden section here, just had a little bit more time and detail put into it. And then I guess the thing I noticed most from that point was that the lighting information wasn't really reading as contrasty as the original image. So just kind of building upon that and adjusting the hue saturation in those color layers really helped build things up. So that's where I moved and tried to get more reddish tones into the wood, which really helped push, I guess, the general ambience of the scene by just having more contrast and building upon more different colors to make it more interesting. So I think this is around when I left Substance Painter and decided to see how it would look in Engine. So as you can see here over on this pass, I spent more time texturing the wood and just trying to get some minute details, which wasn't overkill since it is quite far away from the camera, and more focusing on the colors and the general lighting, just where the light sources would be, where it's going to hit, and just trying to get those details in. Since the biggest thing for a scene like this, where most of the smaller details are quite far away, it's more about the color and the composition, which was luckily handled by Tim. So I just needed to really nail what he had created already. So this is the first shot in Unreal Engine. This was the real composition shot. The background I just painted, put it in behind. A trick I did with the grass that I'll go over later, which is something you could do, I guess, exclusively to the more unlit scenes. And that's how I got those colors to match the ground below. So I guess just moving onwards, there was a lot of foliage that still needed to be placed around. I think I still went back and tweaked the textures multiple times, even from Unreal, just not being quite happy with a few things. And then from this point, I was like, okay, let's establish some of these trees because they're probably one of the most important parts about the scene. So I bring them in. The colors weren't quite hitting here. As you can see, they're a little bit too dark and contrasting. They didn't feel like they worked into the scene. So eventually adjusted that. And this was my first pass at trying to create some trees. So the trees are somewhere where I cheated a little bit as well, because when I was trying to get the hand-painted look, I still wanted it to be double-sided foliage, but I didn't. I wanted to get that lighting data into the trees, and this wasn't cutting it, because you'd paint the top layer and then the underside of it would still have the same colors as above, which I guess is something unique to more unlit texturing workflow. So in this case, the tree leaves are actually the one thing which are using a lit texture. And in this case, I decided this is where they're using a lit texture, which obviously it was pretty straightforward to get that kind of color with. I ended up changing how the texture maps flow and trying to get the shape a little bit more accurate how they were in Tim's concept. And then just working on the colors and adding a few more layers so there's a bit more depth into them. So that's kind of where I got off. So we can hop into the scene here. So this is the scene here. So a few other tricks that I put in, pretty basic really. I just have a few ambient dust specks going around. There's absolutely no lighting in the scene. And just using a few fog sheets to build up some of that ambient fog that was really prevalent in the main scene. And since this was just, I guess, a mini diorama where I was trying to build upon this one concept, I could kind of cheat a lot and not do a lot of this extra work. So the grass in particular, which is just hand painted on and really roughly. And because we are using unlit scene, so I'll show you one of the, if we go into the material for the house. So I guess the most important thing with a scene like this is making sure the colors and you're working with the contrast, and trying to make everything vibrant and I guess working well in the composition. So it's just a really simple material. Just got one texture value, and then I switched this to an unlit texture source. Pretty straightforward. So all of the textures are actually built the same way, except for this one here, which I believe is using something a little bit different. So this one here is good. It's running an emissive color, and it's got its opacity mask, simple grass wind, generally pretty standard setup for foliage, other than the fact that I've set it with an emissive color and used that to try and build up on it. So this is a default lit scene, and that's how I kind of got that shading to work in to the trees to try and fake that. Even though it's an unlit scene, it doesn't look particularly out of place, and I could still get kind of that shading from underneath to work with it. So it's all pretty basic. And the grass here is kind of on the same thing, where it's completely unlit, and I guess a lot of that just came down to matching the colors below. I know there are other projects where they've created specific material shaders, which grabs the vertex color from below, from where the grass is, and individually places that out. But when I was creating the landscape in this case, I had in mind that I would only use a few different shades specifically and not really hinder from that, and that allowed me to get this nice blend in with the landscape below, which I think was really key to a scene like this, especially at an angle like this where that kind of abrupt, if it's too abrupt from where you are, then it kind of looks out of place and it looks like it's hovering. And even if you get too close there, it kind of breaks that illusion as well. So just where you would be usually in a game, you're not really seeing that, and the blend just helps quite a lot with a few different shades of variation and things. So that kind of was generally the main thing with the scene. Everything else was really straightforward. It all just kind of flowed from there. I guess the key thing was the texture work, and trying to get the shadows and details. So if I switch the scene here to unlit, so this is completely unlit. This will be basically how it looked in Substance Painter, and it doesn't quite give the same kind of contrast and depth, despite all the textures using unlit modes. It hasn't quite got that, I guess, contrast and saturation to it. It's kind of lost that luster, and especially with the trees, you can see how it's just using that flat shaded. So switching back here, you can really see the difference, and a lot of that comes down to my post-processing volume, where I'm getting a lot of those colors and pushing them a little bit further. So it's using just pretty basic stuff in general. I guess, yeah, that's most of the scene really. It just came down to the building up the textures, getting a good grasp of the silhouette, especially from an early stage. If I was to push the scene further, I would probably animate this fog um, and build more assets around the environment so I could expand it further out and try and create more of a world to where I guess you could have a player in it and it would feel more vibrant. And I guess since it was such a short-term project, I decided against that and to just focus on speed, cutting a lot of corners, and just experimenting. And that's kind of where I got up to. So these trees specifically were just all cards. I have a few different colors and moved them in the depths in the background, and that's how you get that kind of faked parallax. And that's kind of helped with how I guess the whole scene kind of works in layers, where I guess in the sense that you're working with a 3D scene, but at the same time it's still kind of using the values that a 2D scene would do, and that's how I kind of got this look and tried to match Tim Kaminski's awesome concept art. So if you have any time, I would highly suggest going to check out his work because it's amazing. And he's got a lot of really other amazing things. I'm definitely going to have to create some more concept art from his stuff because it's awesome. Cool. Thank you very much for spending the time. Hopefully I'll be around for more tutorials in the future, where in some cases I might actually build the project with the tutorial in mind and have more content to show rather than just a couple of screenshots in the finished project, which obviously isn't super helpful. But thanks to Artstation for giving me the opportunity. Cheers. Peace out.